We've been going a half hour. Doesn't seem like a half hour.
No, it doesn't. I looked down and the lights started beeping. I'm like, really? All right, I'm ready.
This is fascinating. Well, tell us about some of those early staff people.
Well, you know, thinking back of the early staff men when we were first starting, it was so important at that time. Of course, Irene Fisher-Kuhn, who was the head of the orthopedic nursing over at Sioux Valley, had to come over, and because these were her kids, you know. So she stayed a little while, and so within a few months we had Irene over, and Irene was, well, I don't know how you describe her. She's the greatest gal in the world. And she took over that end of the hospital, the nursing end, and just did a fabulous job. Couldn't have done with, well, you can always do without anybody, but she was such an important part to the hospital school. And then the person that took over from her when she left and was here when she was, Marion Black, another nurse that took over, was a fabulous girl and did a great job for us. In fact, all the nurses did. And back in the early days, the education department was headed up with people like a Mrs. White. We had a little first grade teacher, Ethel, that was just an absolutely fabulous teacher. We had people like Lenore Haber, the first person I hired that was there for years, the music and arts and social studies teacher, the early therapists, trying to think of their names now, and I can't, they don't come to me right this second, but the early therapists worked day and night to get all the therapy in for these kids. We had people like Denny Plooster, who for years worked as my assistant. Keith Newcomb, who later had the music store in town, was my first assistant, came in as a speech therapist and worked up and then became my assistant and left and took over the state Retarded Children's Association before he went into music. The head of our OT department ended up the first executive director of our state special education department. At one time, we had eight staff members in institutions as administrators that left our school and went out and became the administrators of other hospital schools around the country. And I guess the important thing here, Brian, is that the staff that were attracted to the hospital school and to working with those children were special people, really special people. They did a fabulous job. I don't remember anyone ever in all those years mentioned to me what time they were supposed to get off work. I would sit at the front door once in a while when they started showing up a little after 8 and just sit there and look at them as they came in the door. They remind them to get to work where they're supposed to, but it was a fun situation. We all had a good time. Everybody loved everybody. Everybody liked their job and liked their work, and if they didn't, they disappeared. And it was just that kind of staff that always were willing to take time to talk to parents, to visit with each other, to talk to each other about this program and the children and what they were doing. And I met with my full professional staff every year on every child. We did not let somebody else make, as a staff, we made a decision on all these children. So that's the kind of staff we had in those days. And I'm not saying you don't have that today, don't misunderstand me. But we needed that kind of foundation. We needed that kind of spirit. We needed that. You walked I had more people walk into that building and say, the minute you walk in this building, we feel love. Now, these are outside people that say this as they walked in. It was the spirit of the institution itself that was so important. And most people look forward to coming to work. There were those that didn't, I'm sure, but most of them couldn't wait to get to work and enjoy another day.
So, let's take a little walk back. Say you're walking in the building, pick a time, in the 60s, probably after the thing's established a little bit. You had a lot of programs. I mean, you had a pool, you had vocational programs, you had a shop. Tell us about what it would have been like if we would have visited CCHS at that time.
What would have been back then, you say?
What would it have been like? What would we have seen?
After you'd been open a few?
Yeah, say
Well, it's, as a staff, what we were concerned about and interested about was to give the youngsters all the experiences that we could that normal children would get. And so we built it when we built the 2 new wings. On one side, we put in a gymnasium, which included 2 bowling alleys. On the other side, we put in a swimming pool. The only other swimming pool in Sioux Falls was the Y. There were no other swimming pools. Later on, the School for the Deaf put one in. We allowed all spatial groups to use our swimming pool after 7 at night. You name it, the Scouts, Beersford Children's Center, the school, the deaf children, the blind children, the retarded children, all the groups. And we used the pool then from 6 in the morning until 6 at night. When we got ready to build that swimming pool, the board said, we cannot afford that pool. You cannot spend that kind of money for 60 kids. And Joe Foss was governor. And I called Joe. I said, Joe, you need to be at my board meeting tomorrow. And Joe flew in from Pierre. We got the swimming pool. Now, I'm not saying that Joe got the swimming pool, but we got the swimming pool. And then everybody used it. And our kids then learned to swim. It was a therapeutic pool. It was a heated pool. And you don't remember it now, but before they filled in between the 2 wings, those were one whole side of that building were garage doors. So I could throw up garage doors, and we had a big grass patio out there between the 2 wings, and in the summer it was an outside swimming pool. And so it was nice. So, and then we got an industrial arts department. Now, I picked that up from the University of Iowa, where they had a small industrial arts department. And I got hold of Sonoma Club. Sonoma Club bought most of the equipment, and we had an industrial arts department where the youngsters could learn to use tools, simple tools, how to use tools, where to use them, what kind of adaptations do they need in order to be independent in certain areas and fix certain things. We put in a photography shop. We put in a kiln. We did everything of that sort. We had an outside garden where the first graders had their own garden, and they would plant the seeds, hold the plants, pick the food, took all of that food they grew, all those vegetables in the kitchen, prepared them, and we had a big lunch, and everybody celebrated. So the youngsters watched the food grow from seed to plant to the kitchen to where they ate it. And those were the kinds of experiences that we were trying to give these youngsters and provide the kind of areas. And when we built the 3rd wing, then the Carlson Company gave us our place for all our flowers out there because they knew that the kids wanted their own greenhouse. And so they gave us the green. So we had a greenhouse for the kids so they could have the plants. So, it was a matter of adding to the institution in those days the kinds of things that you need for youngsters to grow and mature. Remember, you're not home. They're only there 3 times a year for 3 weeks. So they're there. That's where most of their learning is going to take place. So they had to have the equipment, the opportunities, the chance to grow and mature like other children.
So you did outings. You did camping and fishing and those kind of things too.
You what?
You took the kids on outings? I mean,
On outings. Oh, yes, we took them. we took them every place. We took them to ball games, to the circus. We took them on trips. The traveling classroom was a sample of it.
You had landed by the lake, right?
We had a camp up at Madison, at Lake Brant Lake. The Zimmerman sisters from Madison gave us $250,000 for the one wing, and then in addition to that, that was the swimming pool wing back in those days. Then they gave us the camp, 100 and some acres up on Brant Lake, and which we used as a campsite for years. And we'd take the kids up there, and they had overnight camps and slept in tents and stayed all night and went boating and fishing and did all those things. The kind of experience most kids would want to have. Every time someone thought of something that a kid could do, we went about trying to find how you could get it done.
How about some of your staff trips? You took staff to other facilities to see what they did.
Every year we would take the professional staff on a bus trip to another facility like ours. Now, we did it during one of the vacations, so it was a volunteer situation because they were taking part of their vacation time to take 3 or 4 days to go to North Dakota, to Iowa, to Minnesota, to Omaha, to Chicago, to Denver, to Topeka. And what we did is we would go there and visit their program and then divide up in groups and let their therapists and our therapists meet for a half a day and all that kind of thing. And I think the interesting thing there, Brian, is that when we came back, there were 2 things that happened. First of all, there never was a trip that we took that we didn't learn something. And second of all, there never was a trip that we didn't come back and say, they've got a good program. We're a lot better than they are. So you accomplished 2 things. You had a chance to look to see what else was going on. You had a chance to learn something, and you had a chance to be darn proud of what you were doing. Yeah.
What would, let's see. I know. Tell me about the Elks. Tell me about the Elks' involvement. Because you were involved in the Elks, and they
Yes.
were big supporters.
The Elks, it was natural, of course, that I become an Elk because they were already active during the campaign and during the early days of opening up. And I actually had my assistant immediately join the Elks. And I didn't because I was out traveling all the time and doing anything. But within about 2 years, then I joined the Elks because we were getting contributions from the state Elks Association, and we were getting contributions from some of the local associations. And the Elks have been putting on Christmas parties for the kids over at Sioux Valley Hospital, and for several years through Irene again. And so when the youngsters moved from Sioux Valley Hospital out to our place, then the Elks just naturally kept putting on the Elks Christmas parties. And guys, they'd get a bus and bring a bus out to pick up all the kids in the bus and take them. And back when the Elks Club was downtown, they had to carry them they had to carry beds and walkers and everything up 2 flights of steps to the big Christmas party. So, and they've been great supporters for years and years and years. And the Satoma Club is just, again, they've just never not given help when we really need it. Just a great thing. The American Legion, particularly in the early days, and they still have this one group of American Legion up in Kingsbury County that still give, I think, every year. And then Winter's Rodeo, the people out of Gregory and Winter up that area put on that rodeo. They're a great bunch. They're just a great bunch. And so that's the kind of thing that comes in, helps with our foundation, helps with the cost of operating the center.
About the racetrack down in Sioux City.
Yes, when we started out, we had the horse races. And the horse races, they moved the horse races from Sioux Falls back when we started, and we were involved, and I don't remember just how much. They moved into Jefferson, and we were then given 1 day of the races, and that lasted for a while, and then the horse races disappeared. But in the meantime, then they started the dog track, and when they started the dog track, we had a couple of contacts through those people, and brought up the fellow that owned the outfit and brought it in so forth. He was a real circus promoter. He had a big circus down in Florida too, and he came up, and it was ideal for him. So he let us have 1 day at the racetrack. Now, the state allowed them to race on Sunday only that 1 day for us. So they gave us all the money that came in, and they gave us all the salary. The staff did their work free on that Sunday, and that lasted for years. And we got around $22,000 a year up until the state allowed them to have racing on Sunday, and then the staff took their share. So the last few years we ended up around 11,000. But the interesting thing here is that we put all that money into a separate fund. The interest off of that money, now that there's no longer a dog track, the interest off of that money equals the amount of money that we used to get on 1 day. So it's perpetual in that way on that thing. But yes, we had all those groups were so good to us. They really were.
I'm gonna go back to something we talked about a little bit before. You did a lot in special ed, well, moving special ed forward. There weren't any special ed laws. What?
No, I think it was, yeah, I'm sure it was Joe Foss was governor. And I went to Joe and I said, Joe, we're getting money from the state. We're raising money for crippled children, and we're not a part of the state educational program. No one's supervising us. No one's finding out what we're doing academically. The health department comes down, of course, and checks us from a health standpoint. I said, I think we need a Department of Special Education. I said, I don't know how long I'm going to be here, and I don't know who will take my place. And I said, there needs to be a state tie-in somewhere. So Joe said, okay, go write the piece of legislation. And so we did. We wrote legislation. I got it passed through, setting up a Department of Special Education in the Department of Education. The first administrator was a past member of our staff, and so he knew our program. So he spent most of his time starting classrooms for retarded children in the various, getting that started, because we included within our laws not just crippled children, but all special education. So the public schools now are getting stuck with paying for some classroom space for retarded children too. So that's what we did in that case, is that when a situation in special education came up, they were able to let me write legislation, because there was no legislation. Nobody knew anything about special education. There were no classes in the universities or colleges about special education in our state. There were only, when we first came here, there was two physical therapists and one speech therapist and one OT in the whole state. And three of those 5 people were right here in Sioux Falls. So you see how there was such little information. So what I did was I was able to help build the legislation to provide programs, private programs, and public school programs, and financial aid for those programs, so that it began to develop up to the place where by the time I left, your public schools were providing programs for most of the children that we used to take care of, so that you had a swing to where you were beginning to get the more the children that had larger disabilities and a different kind of disability. And so it was a normal, natural progression through all these years as we got less polio kids and more cerebral palsies and more spinal bifidus and more muscular dystrophies, more post-surgery cases, and to fill in with those. And then as those kind of began to disappear, we began to take a look at the more brain damaged children, and you begin to medically, from a research standpoint, you begin to find out that we really began to know something about some of these kids, and they've been wrongly diagnosed, not diagnosed at all. New kinds of programs began to start in, and this mainly happened after I left. But there was this natural progression during my time away from polio as they disappear to the CPs, to the post-surgeries and all that, into then a change into the kinds of youngsters that were more severely disabled into the program itself. I'm not real well acquainted with what's going on now, other than I'm extremely impressed with what I see that's going on. So I couldn't tell you and list the kinds of children that they're really taking care of now, but I think they're doing well.
That leads me to another question I was going to ask, and that's, kids are kids, parents are parents, therapists are therapists. What would you say to a young therapist or psychologist coming out of college now about working with kids and this work? What would you say?
At my age, I think I tend to think more of the child, where I might have used to think half child, half staff. I feel very strongly in talking to a young, if you're not willing to be dedicated to the program, and if you aren't willing to know exactly what you're getting into before you get into it, stay away from it. It takes a special kind of person with a big heart and a willingness to work and learn and continue to learn, because you are now getting involved into the kind of program that is changing constantly. There are new things being learned. We're only beginning to learn about the brain and how the brain affects the whole body system, emotionally, physically, everything else. So if you want to get in the program, be sure you look at it very carefully, because it's not fair to the child to have people changing all the time from a staff standpoint, people coming in trying to learn on them. And of course there's a lot of that has to happen too, but it's very important that it's a dedicated staff that really want to work with those children, and they come from a good background too, a good educational background.
Well, is there anything, we're coming up on an hour here, so is there anything that you'd like to say? Anything overall as far as your...
Well, I think I can say this, now that I've been gone for 30 some years, or 20 some years. It's awfully good at this age to go out and see a place that you can be proud of. Well, that's important. I was gone from, and very seldom got out there for 14, 16 years. And so I can't say anything about that time. But then now in the last few years, you and the administration out there have invited me out. They've opened up the place, they've let me see it. I've seen the attitude of staff. I've seen the kids and the fabulous job that the staff are doing with this very severely disabled child that needs so much care, so much understanding, that I'm just proud to now say that, hey, I used to be a part of that, and so, yes, I would want to say that, because I'm proud of that staff out there. I'm proud of what they're doing, and I'm proud of the attitude that I seem to get from them. And it's fun to walk in and see them laughing and kidding, having fun again.
Covered everything that was on there.
Anything else you'd like to say? We've sure talked your arm off in an hour here.
Well, as you say, you know, probably tomorrow, say, my God, throw half of that out and let's start over. We forgot the important stuff. But, you know, I think the thing that is not there, we've gotten most of it in, is probably some of the people, like the board, but you've got board members. And one thing I left out is the doctors.
Oh, let's talk about
Is that on?
it.
Oh, the one thing I left out really was about during all those years that I was out there, the doctors of this town provided the care for those youngsters free of charge. There was never $1 spent paying a salary to a physician, that pediatrician, neurologist,